We need to reduce emissions across every workplace in every sector dramatically if we're going to meet the imperative of a 1.5 degree limit on warming. So we need everybody taking every step as quickly as possible. And just transition really is the key that will unlock that ambition for us to be able to do what we need to do when we need to do it. "2021 was a really hard year for climate events, extreme climate events. We had an extreme drought across the prairies, which impacted farmers tremendously, followed by, several hundred wildfires across the western provinces in particular, but also northern Ontario, which put many emergency responders in harm's way. There was an extreme heat wave that lasted for days and days and weeks, killing almost 600 people. You wouldn't think that in Canada that 600 people would lose their lives to a heat wave, but many of those people were, vulnerable, low income, isolated, without many of the social supports that they need to be able to access help. No access to air conditioning, and many people passed alone in their homes. Extreme weather events related to climate have had a real impact on workers and families and communities, not just in the last year, but we are seeing these events more frequently. They are more severe, and they are already impacting workers' lives and livelihoods. The current government has made a commitment to implementing just transition legislation and is consulting on some of the principles that should be should be contained within that legislation. Workers need to see action. They need a plan, and they need to be, as I said earlier, at the table helping to build that plan. And so we are keen to see ambitious just transition legislation that puts workers at the table, building the plan, looking at the whole of the economy in Canada, building the plan sector by sector, because we know that it is not going to look the same necessarily, and the needs are not the same in different sectors, all of which will need to rapidly decarbonize, and right down to the workplace level. So while it's true implementation has been a challenge, Canada's unions are confident that this is a priority certainly it's a priority for unions, and we are going to make sure that it continues, that it is a priority to see legislation implemented, legislation that meets the needs of workers and communities and ensures that the benefits of skills training and good jobs that go along with some of this investment can be realized by women and racialized workers and others who have been historically excluded from some of these benefits, and also while respecting Indigenous rights. The Canadian Labour Congress is Canada's largest labour organization, representing over 3 million workers in every sector of the economy in every region of the country. Last June in 2021, we held our national convention, our constitutional convention, and as part of the resolutions work, there was a policy paper, an ambitious policy paper on a climate action agenda for Canada's labour movement that will guide our work until the next convention. And it included many, really robust calls to action on just transition. It included calling for strong investments in social protections to provide that sort of stability of a strong social safety net as we manage this transition. If you look at the coal sector, which is sort of on the leading edge of this transition and is transitioning much more quickly than many other sectors. In Alberta, where most of the coal power workers live and work, the unions there negotiated a series of supports for workers with the previous provincial government to ensure that workers had access to training supports if they needed them, to mobility supports if they needed to travel for new work, to retirement supports to make sure that their pensions are whole at the end of the long working career. We are a country with a large fossil fuel sector. That is going to create a challenge. There are many, many workers that are tied to this industry, and it is pretty regionally concentrated. So while it may represent a more modest number of workers across the country, in some regions of the country it is a much larger employer. And so there are definitely challenges associated with that. That doesn't mean that they are insurmountable. We certainly are up for the challenge. But we cannot separate the need to rapidly reduce emissions from the need to recognize fairness, and that workers didn't create this problem. In fact, much of the work that workers who are in high emitting sectors help to build the Canadian economy. And so it is a matter not just of fairness, but it is also a pragmatic question. We need for workers to see themselves in this low carbon economy, to see a future for themselves and their families, their kids, their communities, because there are lots of opportunities there. We know that ambitious climate action brings with it many, many more jobs than doing nothing. And doing nothing is not an option.